G'day guys and gal, the Imperium has a bit of a dark sense of humour. When the Emperor was first growing his domain, although he wanted to project strength and power, he also didn't want to come across as a genocidal maniac, even though he kinda was. As such, the Imperium like to use softer words and paint themselves as liberators and saviours for humanity, not the oppressors. The best example of this was the Imperium referring to all planetary takeovers, whether peaceful or genocidal, as compliance, which seems like an innocent word which in turn makes it threatening. Even Horus referred to the Siege of Terra as the compliance of terror. It did make sense. The goal was to make a world comply with the Imperium's demands. It didn't really matter what the method of achieving that compliance was. So I thought it'd be interesting to dive into the process of compliance and its potential outcomes. Before we get started, a lot of you guys have been asking, and yes, I'm doing a calendar for 2026, and yes, you can buy it right now, and no, it doesn't have tits in it. It actually has something better. 12 extremely awesome, professionally hand-drawn artwork showing off the best moments from the lore, whether it be the Lion bashing out Angron's brains, or the start of the Months of Shame, or Conrad finally getting vindication and death. All the artworks are amazing and cannot be found anywhere else on the internet or beyond. They're exclusive to the calendar. But Majorkill, why would I buy a physical calendar if I can just use a Google or digital calendar? Shut the fuck up, Timmy! I wish Epstein had gotten to you. Physical calendars are actually really handy. See, digital is great for meetings and appointments, but they lack soul. There's something really fun and actually useful about writing down anniversaries, birthdays, upcoming events, or other important moments in a physical calendar. It just commits it to memory way more. Plus, obviously, the artwork is insanely sick. The calendar comes in 3 versions: the A4 version, which is smaller, more portable, and more affordable; the A3 version, which is the version to probably hang up and it's just bigger, no shit, it's A3. Then there is the limited legendary edition, which features a custom front and back cover, and additional artwork, and is signed. The calendars will only be available for sale for 2 weeks, then they're gonzos. While you're there, you can also grab some discounted legacy merch, or even tack on some of the outdated but still cool previous year calendars, especially if you want a goon, as I used to make booby calendars with actual cosplay models. Link is below, 2 weeks only, don't miss out. Today we'll go over the process of Imperial compliance, detailing the outcomes, and looking at if a planet ever managed to resist the compliance. Let's get into it. So you don't really hear much about Imperial compliance in the modern setting. Did they change up the terminology? Well, no, it's actually a bit simpler than that. The Imperium isn't really conquering anymore. Every planet that the Imperium can feasibly take has been taken. There are next to no more hidden or undiscovered human empires, and most Xenos were also driven to extinction. No, these days the Imperium is trying to barely cling on to what they already have, or are trying to take back worlds that were originally theirs. If they entered a new golden age of conquering, then it's likely the term would become more common again. The last genuine time of Imperial expansion was during Lord Solar Macarius' tenure as Warlord of the Imperium, where he managed to conquer more worlds than a Primarch did. So no, it's not that the term has fallen out of use like the Imperial truth has, it's just that the Imperium isn't conquering fresh worlds anymore, or at least it's so rare that you don't read much about it. However, you don't go from 1 world to 1 million worlds without an absolute fuckload of conquering, so the term was more common than Ligma back during the Great Crusade. But what actually was a compliance, and why were some compliances more or less just virus bombing worlds, whilst others were extremely peaceful and prosperous? Here was the general policy. All of humanity had to join the Imperium, no exceptions. There could be no rival empires or even basic allies and trade partners. They all had to fall under the Emperor. Even when the Emperor made exceptions, which was extremely rare, such as allowing the Mechanicum a shitload of autonomy and to almost treat them like a partner instead of a servant, it was only because the cooperation of Mars was so essential, and besides, the Emperor ruled over them anyway, he just made them feel like he didn't. For Xenos, it was a bit different and was highly situational. If an unchill Primarch encountered a Xeno Empire, even a peaceful one, they were screwed. If a peaceful Xeno race was encountered by a chill Primarch, they would sometimes be flagged not for extermination, but more so to become a protectorate that could be engaged and even traded with. After all, the Emperor did actually build a section in the Imperial Palace designed for Xeno diplomats, but while aliens had some flexibility, humans absolutely did not. Now, what each compliance looked like would vary depending on which legion came to a human world, or if any legion came at all. But what would generally happen is that Imperial scout ships and fleets would detect a habitable world and then determine what was on it. They would analyze if there was a sentient race. If so, was it human? If so, was it a threat? Did it have assets such as STCs? Did it seem peaceful? Did their culture seem to align with the Imperium's? After gathering the report, a recommendation would be sent out on which legion or Imperial force should come and perform the compliance. For example, if the world was full of hostile berserk Xenos, then the World Eaters or Space Wolves would be a great choice. If it was a powerful but highly civilized human civilization, then the Lunar Wolves, the Ultramarines, or even the Dark Angels would often be flagged. If it was a more basic but still interesting human culture, then perhaps the Wordbearers or Emperor's Children would be best, and so on. Now, often it wasn't practical to try summon a particular legion from across the galaxy when there was another one a lot closer, which did result in the occasional incident of the World Eaters being used on a planet that probably should have been handled by the Imperial Fist and so on, but there was always a method to the madness. Now, despite its warlike nature, the Imperium preferred to have peaceful compliances. They were a lot quicker, less expensive, and the worlds would maintain their populations and infrastructure, becoming productive a lot faster than if the world was razed to the ground. So whenever possible, the Imperium would kick things off with diplomacy. If they felt like they needed to do a show of force, Space Marines or even a Primarch would make contact, confirm a meeting, then show up in full battle plate, talking of a future of a humanity united and dominant once again. They would offer amazing technology to these worlds, and since most of these worlds had been battered during the Age of Strife, the Imperium's arrival would provide an overall net boost in quality of life. You can see why these poor, weak worlds would often eagerly accept compliance, especially when you had someone like Fulgrim speaking to you directly of greatness in a golden age. The vast majority of compliances were very easy and peaceful. Often a small fleet of guardsmen would be enough for most human worlds, with the Space Marine legions doing diplomacy for the greater, more impressive worlds, where they really needed to show off. After all, if you had a small stellar empire and some dirty guardsmen with las rifles showed up and asked you to join them and serve them, you'd probably tell them to get fucked. But if Horus did it, you'd be like, yes, puppy. Now for these peaceful compliances, what would happen next? Well, the Space Marine Legion will hang around for a bit just to make sure the transition happens smoothly. Iterators would then be brought down to the world to help convince the masses of the Imperium's righteousness. Iterators basically just being Riz Lords who were amazing at public speaking. The Mechanicum would also have representatives to inspect any technology the world had, ensuring it was compliant to human standards and also taking it and copying it if it was applicable or involved in STC design. If the world's leaders were very compliant and helpful, often they would be the ones elevated to become the planetary governors, as once again, it's a lot better to have someone native to the world who understands it to lead rather than shipping in an off-world governor who the population would naturally dislike. When the Legion was sure that the compliance was genuine, they would quickly move off to the next compliance, their role as peacekeepers taken over by guardsmen. Overall, it was a very smooth, methodical and peaceful process if the planet was happy to unconditionally enter compliance. But what if the planet fought back? What if they engaged in diplomacy but then just said, nah, let's go to war? Would it be genocide? No, not really. See, the Imperium understood and respected the human spirit and its defiance. They would accept the declaration of war and engage in it. Now that war would look different depending on the legion. Some legions would try to limit civilian and infrastructure damage, just targeting military targets and almost like abiding by a code of war. Others would just go full fuck mode and obliterate everything. However, generally as soon as the world surrendered, the fighting would stop. Sometimes that would be after the first battle, where the enemy saw how vicious the Space Marines were. Sometimes the world would fight to the bitter end, only surrendering when all their cities were burning. Upon surrendering, the compliance would begin to look almost the same as the peaceful ones. The Legion would stay to ensure compliance, whilst iterators would come down to the world. There would be a rebuilding effort, which would help win over the local populace, who were then generally treated with dignity. Either an Imperial governor would be flown in from off-world to take over, or if some parts of the world had sided with the Imperium, then their leader would likely get elevated instead. Overall, more effort would have to go into the compliance to make sure the world wouldn't rise up and seek revenge when the Space Marines left, but the Imperium was actually pretty merciful here, generally. However, the exception would be if the planet tried to engage in treachery. For example, planets that held the false flag of peace but then turned on Imperial delegations or pretended to surrender to try and assassinate a Primarch. These planets would often get brutalized, the vengeful Space Marines causing way more damage and destruction than they would have otherwise. But to be honest, even in these situations, the Imperium usually wouldn't perform a genocide. For example, on planet 6319, the humans pretended to be open to diplomacy, but then killed one of Horus's closest lieutenants before then almost killing his equerry, both in treacherous circumstances. Yes, the planet was hit hard and yes, its leader was killed, but when it did actually surrender, it was treated very similar to how a non-treacherous planet would have been treated. Rebuilt, iterators came in, population left intact. The Imperium before the Horus Heresy were actually like, not too bad. But what if a planet that was compliant decided to declare themselves independent? What if they rose up, killed the governor and took control? Well, that's generally when the Night Lords were sent in. See, new human worlds didn't know about the Night Lords or their reputation. However, planets that rose up would, so often they would shit the bed hearing about the Night Lords approaching, surrendering before a shot was fired. This often didn't do much to save the leaders of the uprising, who would find themselves absolutely brutalized and their corpses displayed for all to see, but yes, the Imperium did have an effective policy for treacherous worlds. Basically, if the Imperium beat you fair and square, as long as you're a good sport about it, you got away pretty unscathed. But what about the times where the Imperium would go full genocide mode? Well, sometimes it just happened, like if the World Eaters were sent to a resisting world. This is actually why people wanted to censure and punish the World Eaters. Their genocidal policy was actually going against the grain. But other than those brain nail retards going a bit too hard, what would cause the Imperium to wipe out another human civilization? Well, the main cause was if the populace was corrupted in some way, whether it be by the warp or an alien race. Now, corrupted doesn't have to mean they have horns or altered DNA. Humans on a world shared with the Elder were exterminated because they saw the Elder as their saviors and worshipped them. The Imperium believed it would be more efficient to wipe them out and repopulate the world with colonists, so that's what they did. Basically, whenever the world's people and infrastructure could not be integrated or salvaged into the Imperium, total annihilation was the policy. Now, did anyone actually ever successfully manage to resist compliance or manage to strike a deal with the Imperium during the Great Crusade to maintain their autonomy? Absolutely fucking not. When I say there were absolutely no exceptions, I meant it. The best example of this was a group of space wolves who came to a world that was being terrorized by the Dark Elder for generations. They came, teamed up with the human resistance, fought side by side for months, and finally emerged victorious. The world began celebrating their liberation and praised the wolves as their heroes. However, when the Wolf Lord said to the leader of the humans, who he had fought side by side with, "You must join us now in the Imperium," the leader said, "I respect you and thank you, but now we are free, we will never serve another. Our world will remain our own." So as the people danced in the street, the Wolf Lord, with a heavy heart, called down an orbital strike and wiped out everyone. Yes, there were times where a human world was very powerful and fought off an initial Imperial invasion, however all that did was mark it as a higher threat level, and then multiple legions would be called in to enforce a compliance. I can think of only 2 times a world technically resisted compliance, and both times were not because they were powerful enough to do so, in fact quite the opposite. The first was a special world that had an amazing STC library on it. An order of monks dedicated their lives to ensuring the library would never fall into the wrong hands. So while outwardly they joined the Imperium with no resistance, they managed to keep their library hidden. The second case I can think of was a world full of abhuman centaurs who modified themselves to be able to withstand the world's conditions. But they were very much still stable humans who would have loved to join the Imperium. They even actively fought off Chaos influence. However, the scouts from the Imperium knew that they looked too mutated and would be wiped out, so in an act of mercy, they declared the world uninhabited and of no use or import, so the centaur people were left alone and allowed to exist. But yeah, both of these cases were not actually resisting compliance technically. The way to look at things is this: we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Either way, the result will be the same, it's just how painful it will be to get there. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then pick up a Majorkill 2026 lore artwork calendar, on sale for 2 weeks only. Seriously guys, these artworks are insane. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.